He was born into privilege, but died a traitor. While Britain battled Hitler, John Amery joined the Nazis. This is the shocking story of a man who betrayed his country and paid the ultimate price. You're watching Histox, history like you've never heard it before. July 10th, 1940. The skies over southern England erupt in fire and fury. The German Luftwaffe unleashes its aerial onslaught in what would become the infamous Battle of Britain. For weeks, the sound of bombers fills the air, their payloads reducing airfields, ports, and entire neighborhoods to rubble. London burns. Coventry crumbles, yet the British people stand unbroken. Winston Churchill's call to never surrender echoes through every street and soul. The Royal Air Force, vastly outnumbered, fights back with unwavering resolve. By October, Hitler concedes defeat in the skies, his plans to invade Britain crushed by British defiance. But behind the public unity, there were cracks. While the nation rallied, not all hearts beat for Britain. A small, disturbing fringe viewed the Nazis not as enemies, but as saviors. Among these outliers was one of the most infamous British traitors of the war, John Amery. The privileged son of a respected politician, he would become the face of betrayal in Britain's darkest hour. John Amery was born into status and influence on March 14, 1912, in London. His father, Leo Amery, a prominent member of Parliament and later a government minister, held sway in conservative circles. But Leo harbored secrets. His mother was of Jewish-Hungarian descent, a detail he kept hidden from his colleagues in society, fearful of how it might affect his standing. From the start, young John was different. His nanny described him as a hard child, prone to violent tantrums. By age 5, teachers labeled him abnormal and deeply self-absorbed. He cycled through schools, tutors, and therapists, all baffled by his erratic, troubling behavior. At Harrow, one of Britain's elite public schools, he spiraled further, caught sneaking out to nightclubs and punished for theft and moral breakdown. A psychologist later concluded, John had no sense of right or wrong. At just 17, John contracted syphilis. He claimed he caught it by prostituting himself to men while at a school in Switzerland. Despite these red flags, he was intellectually capable and even secured a place at Oxford. But true to his chaotic nature, he abandoned academia to chase fleeting dreams in the film industry. With charm and manipulation, he convinced wealthy acquaintances to fund a fake film project called Jungle Skies. It was a scam. When the money dried up, he married a woman he claimed was wealthy, Una Wing, who, in reality, was a prostitute known to the police. They fled to Paris, living lavishly off pawned goods and borrowed money. John, now eccentric to the extreme, carried a teddy bear everywhere, bought at drinks and comics, and walked the streets armed with a pistol, haunted by imagined enemies. Politically, John had begun to shift. Deeply anti-communist, he saw fascism not as evil, but as salvation. In 1936, bankrupt and desperate, he joined Franco's forces in Spain, running guns and even fighting on the front lines. He later claimed to have witnessed the atrocities of communist torturers in Barcelona, images that would haunt and radicalize him. In Paris, he was drawn to French fascist leader Jacques Doriot and traveled through fascist Europe, Austria, Italy, Germany, immersing himself in the ideology of authoritarianism. After World War II erupted in 1939, Amery found himself in occupied France living with a prostitute named Jeanine Bard. It was then that he became useful to the Nazis. In 1942, thanks to Nazi contacts in his family name, Amery was welcomed to Berlin, personally approved by Adolf Hitler, and given the title guest of the Reich. The Nazis saw propaganda gold, a British aristocrat who had switched sides. On November 19, 1942, he broadcast his first speech over German radio, accusing Churchill of lying to the British people and claiming their real enemy was the Jew and his puppets. Amery called for revolution. He urged British soldiers to rise up and join Germany's war against Bolshevism. But even in Berlin, his usefulness had limits. As his propaganda value declined, he moved back to Paris and hatched a more outrageous plan. John Amery's final and most damning scheme was to raise a military unit of British traitors, the British Free Corps. His idea? Recruit British prisoners of war to fight for the Nazis against the Soviet Union. It was madness, but he was determined. He visited a POW camp near Paris in early 1943. preaching anti-communist rhetoric to a crowd of 40 to 50 prisoners. They laughed him off. Most wanted nothing to do with him. Only one man, Kenneth Barry, joined the cause. Amery's plan failed. The SS dismissed him, and he drifted to Mussolini's collapsing Italy in 1944, where he was captured by partisans. When the British arrived, he welcomed them with strange relief. "Thank God you're here. I thought they were going to shoot me." In custody, he rambled about lost belongings, his teddy bear, his wife's fur coats, seemingly unaware that he faced the gallows. Back in London, he stood trial for 8 counts of high treason. His family begged for leniency. His brother claimed he had taken Spanish citizenship. His father insisted he was mentally unwell, but the court refused every defense. On November 28, 1945, in a move that stunned the courtroom, John Amery pleaded guilty to all charges. The trial lasted just 8 minutes. 3 weeks later, on December 19th, he was hanged by famed executioner Albert Pierrepoint. As he climbed the steps to the noose, Amery turned to Pierrepoint and said with calm irony, "Mr. Pierrepoint, I've always wanted to meet you, but not, of course, under these circumstances." Thus ended the life of the man who betrayed his country, embraced its enemies, and became a cautionary tale of privilege, madness, and treason. As the gallows creaked into place at Wandsworth Prison, the man who felt the weight of disgrace more than anyone was Leo Amery, a patriot, a minister who had once stood alongside Churchill. Leo had spent his life in service of the crown. And now, that same name, Amery, was etched in disgrace across every newspaper in Britain. He had done everything to save his son. He had written letters to judges, begged for psychiatric evaluations, even appealed to Churchill himself. But none of it could change the fact. John had not been coerced. He had chosen betrayal. And worse, he had done it not for money, not even for ideology, but out of some chaotic inner compulsion to destroy. When John entered the courtroom for his trial, he did not appear as a remorseful son. He smiled, he chatted with the guards, and then, with a flourish, pleaded guilty, refusing to allow any defense to be made on his behalf. Some believe it was an act of theatrical defiance. Others saw it as a final, twisted attempt at controlling his own fate. After the execution, Leo Amery was left to pick up the pieces. In a bitter irony, the man who had once demanded that Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain resign for appeasing Hitler had now fathered Britain's most infamous Nazi collaborator. It was a wound that would never heal. In the years that followed, John Amery's name faded from the public's lips, but never from the archives of treason. While others like William Joyce, Lord Haw Haw, became more famous for their Nazi broadcasts, Amery remained unique. He was not just a voice. He had attempted to build a Nazi army from within the ranks of British soldiers. He had dreamed of a revolution, fought for a foreign flag, and embraced the ideology of Britain's most vicious enemy. What drove him? Historians still debate it. Was it mental illness? A pathological need for attention? Or a desperate search for identity in a life riddled with rejection? Perhaps it was all of these. But one thing remains certain: John Amery was not simply misguided. He was deliberate. In 1945, as Britain emerged from the rubble of war, it did so with heroes and with traitors. For every Churchill, there was a Mosley. For every Spitfire pilot, a collaborator like Amery. He stood as a reminder that betrayal doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it comes dressed in a fine suit, with a cut-glass accent, and a last name tied to power. In the end, Amery did not just betray his country, he betrayed his potential. He could have been a thinker, a reformer, even a revolutionary in the best sense. Instead, he became a tool for tyranny, remembered not for what he stood for, but for how far he fell. And it remains a chilling reminder that not all enemies wear foreign uniforms. Some speak your language, share your culture, and walk among you. Until it's too late, hit that sub button, because history just got real on Histox.